Hey, what's up, Shoot Extraordinary Conference? I hope that you guys have had an amazing 2 days of learning, growing, and becoming extraordinary with Lensbaby and all of our amazing speakers. We're going to wrap up the day with a bit of a Q&A panel with the entire team and answer your questions that you've had over the course of the last couple of days. A reminder, I am Michael Anthony. I am your host and MC and Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at Lensbaby, and I'm going to give our speakers an opportunity to each introduce themselves, starting with co-founder Craig Strong.
I'm Craig Strong. I'm here with the important people, which is all of our users that are out creating amazing work. But I started Lensbaby back in 2003. With Sam Pardue and have been going ever since, but largely based on everything you've been telling us that you want. And I'm excited to be here with such great company and answer some of your questions.
Thanks, Craig. Dana, would you take a moment and introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Dana Lee, and I'm from Portland, Oregon. And I have been a photographer for about 10 years. And my specialty or genre is portrait and fine art photography.
Amazing. Thank you, Dana.
That's
Shelly.
all I have to say.
I'm Shelly Corbett, and I'm from Seattle, Washington, and I've been a photographer for 30 years, but the last 8 years of my life has been dominated by toy photography. Happy to be here.
Amazing. Thank you, Shelly. Kathleen.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Clemens. I'm a natural light nature photographer from the coast of Maine. I've been shooting since 2003.
Thank you, Kathleen. Jackie.
Hi, I'm Jackie Kramer. I'm in St. Augustine, Florida. Lived in Alaska for 29 years so, and I've been doing photography since I was about 16, shooting birds and flowers, and I'm still shooting birds and flowers. I also do weddings, but artistic floral photography is my thing.
Thank you, Jackie. Anne.
I'm Anne Belmont. I'm coming to you from the Chicago area, and I am a flower photographer and passionate about seeing the world up close and shooting with Lensbaby lenses.
Amazing. Thank you, Anne. Joe.
Hi, everyone. I am Joe, and I am a fine art lifestyle photographer. I've been doing this for just a little over 5 years. And I mainly photograph families, kids, and self-portraits. And I also do a little bit of nature work on the side.
Thank you, Joe. And Ute.
Hey, I'm Uta. I am in Los Angeles, and I'm a fine art photographer. I do portraits too, and I've been a photographer for the last 8 years. Discovered Lensbaby, I guess 5 years ago, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for being here as well. And thank you to our amazing panel for taking time today to answer your questions. I don't know about you guys, but I'm super excited about this. There's so many questions that I think Lensbaby photographers around the world constantly have, and I'm grateful that we are able to compile those for you here today. I'm going to start with one of the most simple questions for co-founder Craig Strong. Craig, why did you invent Lensbaby? Craig, you're on mute.
All right, I started it off well here. So I invented Lensbaby because I was in a rut. I had 10 years of being a self-employed photographer and had gotten really good at certain things in that, but wanted to challenge myself. And so you know, it was through happenstance, and I talked about that some in the keynote, that I happened upon this lens that was not an L series lens. It was not as you know, traditionally good as I could afford, and it opened up a whole new world of photography. So it was a happy accident on one hand, and yet I was ready for it as well. So it ended up really giving my photography the same kind of passion that I had in high school and college when I was just discovering everything about photography. All of a sudden, here was a whole new world, and that's how it started.
Amazing. It's so funny what happens when you kind of just go with the flow and see what happens with life. My next question, or our next question, I should say, from Agatha is going to be for the panel. So everyone will have an opportunity to answer this question. from Agatha. I would like to ask, what is the favorite Lens Baby product of our speakers, and what the most difficult thing is for them in shooting with Lens Baby optics? And we'll start this question off with Kathleen.
Great. Asking me to choose my favorite Lens Baby is like asking me to choose my favorite child. And I have 3 sons, and that the favorite varies by the day, sometimes the week. So, you know, that's pretty impossible. I can narrow it down to 2, possibly 3. The Velvet 85 is my favorite velvet, and the Sweet 50 has a piece of my heart. But I have just started shooting with the Spark 2.0. So you might want to talk with me in another week, because I think I have now moved into 3 favorites. As for difficulty, gosh, I think that sometimes people expect to get perfect results right away with a new lens, and they don't give themselves the time to really get to know a particular lens or optic. So, I mean, to get around that, I would suggest you just put it on your camera and leave it there. You know, don't shoot for a half hour and go, I can't do this. You know, leave it on there for a week, maybe 2 weeks, and really, really work that lens and see what you can do with it.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Kathleen. Anne, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with Kathleen. It's like trying to choose your favorite child. I would say that the lens that I use the most for my photography is probably the Velvet 85. I have a very strong love affair with that lens. But the Sol 45 comes in a very close second. I love the freedom and the creativity of that lens. When I first got it, I thought, oh, I don't know, fixed aperture. I'm all about aperture. How could this possibly be the right lens for me? And about 30 minutes after I started shooting with it, I realized the potential that this lens had for really narrowing your focus and helping you push the boundaries of you know, what's in focus and what's in not, really truly using that selective focus. So I adore that lens. But, you know, I love all my Lens Babies. I think I own them all. So it's hard to pick favorites. And I think, you know, there's certain situations, certain subjects that you reach for a particular lens. And as far as difficulties, I think, you know, I also agree with what Kathleen said, that, you know, you just have to really practice. You have to get in there and really work with the lens. I think the thing that people most struggle with is understanding the focus. But there are so many tips that, you know, we can all share with you to help master that. So everything is possible. It just comes with practice.
How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, right?
Practice.
Jackie. Jackie, you're on mute.
My current favorite is the Spark, but it's followed by, or maybe on the same plane as, the Twist. I love the Twist because it has a lot of flexibility for me. I can get a twist, or I can get a really creamy effect with it if I really increase the magnification, put my filters or macro converters on. I like that it can go into the optic swap system, but I love the Burnside too. And then I do love my Sol 45. It's very unique. And I think I had one more in mind, but you know, I have to say that I think, where do you get these ideas from, Craig? I think there couldn't be any more. And then you come out with something. And I just feel like getting to know a new one is so much fun. And I totally agree with what you said, Kathleen. You've got to put it on and leave it on. And then you'll become, you know, more masterful at getting the effects that you will be surprised with. So for right now, it's the Spark and the Twist.
Yeah, amazing. Dana.
You guys are all making me want to go shopping for new lenses. But right out of the gate, about 10 years ago when I started photography, I very early on was introduced to Lens Babies. So I've been shooting with Lens Babies most of my career as a photographer. And I started with the Sweet 50 So that one has my heart. I also love it because I'm a portrait photographer, so it's a great focal length for portraits. And I love the softness of the blur, just pairs really well with portraiture. So that's my favorite if you made me pick one.
Yay, she picked one.
Yeah, as far as difficulties, I think I still struggle with shooting at wide open apertures, like shooting wide with each lens and really nailing the focus, but I'm learning to embrace the imperfections as well. So
yeah, that's powerful. And that's so much of this journey, not only as a photographer, but as a Lens Baby photographer, is embracing the imperfection, because that's what we strive for, and understanding that perfect isn't actually real. Joe, what are your thoughts?
yeah.
Hey everyone. So I started using Lens Baby lenses from 2016-ish, around sometime. And my very first lens, baby lens, was the Edge 80. And at that time, I actually fell in love with free lensing. And that's one of the reasons why I started picking up my Lens Baby lenses, trying to get similar effects with how I used to freelance. But slowly over time, I introduced, I think I have most of the Lens Baby lenses as well in my collection, but to date, for over 3 years, I've been using my Edge optics. So now I have the Edge 35, and pretty much, I think I would say 90% of the time for my personal work, I use my Edge 35 optic. And then my Sol 45, I think, would come my second favorite. I say only second, only just because it's just different kind of work that I would generally use it with. So I think I would say Edge 35, then the Sol 45. And then when it comes to, difficulty in using these lenses, and I think I would just go back to what Kathleen said as well. The only reason I may struggle with a particular lens is because I have not practiced with it enough. And that lens right now, because I have a Sweet 50, and maybe I'll be looking at Dana for pointers, but I have the Sweet optic and I just haven't used it enough. Like I've tried it twice and I'm like, oh, I can't really figure out the focus here. And I gave up on it. So I'm like, yeah, of course, that's the only reason that, I find it difficult, because I used it twice and then I never put it back on my camera again. But on the other hand, my Edge or my Sol, it's on my camera 80-90% of the time. So of course it's, more, because the more I use it, the more I start to love it. So yeah, so that would be my answer in a summary.
Yeah, Joe, I totally relate to that, because as an Edge ambassador, I don't get the sweets at all. And so like, even though they might mingle on my camera for 5 or 6 minutes, like I don't get it. But that's the thing, what's so beautiful about this, it's not necessarily every lens is for every person.
Right.
Uta, please, what are your thoughts?
So I can just first of all, second whatever was said before. I also own, I guess, every Lens Baby. My favorite has been for a very, very long time the Edge 35. And then I tried the Velvet 28. And so far, I never liked the Velvet line because I wasn't a fan of the soft look. But I pushed myself when they set up a month. I committed to a month trying the Velvet 28, and surprise, I fell in love with it. So I get it when people say that one lens is what they love and another lens is the opposite. So for me, that was a very good experience to just commit to a lens for a month and then to see, wow, you can get results as soon as you get to know the lens a little better.
Yeah, there's a challenge in that, right? A month with a lens, you're going to learn all of the ins and outs of it, right?
Yeah, not only that, but you also start seeing in a different way, because there is no way out. You cannot deal with other effects. You cannot choose another lens. You cannot work with another focal length. You're stuck. So being stuck can sometimes be the best thing that happened, like COVID. I feel like in the first place, it's not what we want, but at the same time, so many beautiful things were born out of COVID. And that's the same with committing to one lens. Being stuck with a lens is a good thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as I'm sitting here, I'm like, do I want to take on that challenge? 1 month with a Sweet? I don't know. We'll find out. Shelly, what are your thoughts?
I am a huge fan of the optic swap system, and I am a Sweet 50 lover. Like, if I had to just take my collection down to one, it would be the Sweet 50 with a macro attachment. I couldn't live without it. I don't know what you guys are talking about. It's not that tough. But like everyone has said, I mean, you have to just live with it for a while, and they all have a little bit of a learning curve. And my second favorite would be the Edge 50, but those two, if I had to just only choose them and that's all I could take on the road, those two cover all my bases. Love them both.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that, the same as you guys, like picking one is very hard, but we all have that go-to, right? Now, Craig, this will be an interesting question for you because you have the front line on this. You've experimented and played with these more than any of us combined. And so now the question for you is, what is your favorite and what is the most difficult?
Well, it should come as no surprise that I also have them all, and that I don't have any problem choosing my favorite child as it comes to Lens Baby anyhow. And that is a little off the beaten path here. I absolutely love the pinhole optic. And the reason is it is so different. I mean, Lens Baby started with something that was different than what I could do with any other camera lens, that I could buy at a camera store. So I was making them myself. And then if I want to diverge even further from that, I go back to the discontinued pinhole zone plate optic because it reduces things down to color, composition, and that's pretty much it, and contrast. And when I have to reduce my vision to communicate something real with that limited palette, I feel much more stretched, and that limitation, like Ute was saying about going out with just one lens for a month, if I'm limiting and taking focus out of the equation, although there's, you can see things in it, and it does have some sharpness in it, especially in the zone plate. But I love that reduction of my choices down to something really dark, something that really doesn't have the palette of a normal lens.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that one is, pinhole photography, as old as it is still something that's very new to people. So, if you don't know what that is, please Google it. I've experimented with myself, and, while it is very challenging, the reward on the backside of it is very wonderful. So our next question comes from Reed, and Reed's question is, what would your advice be for someone getting their very first Lens Baby? What would your advice be for someone getting their very first Lens Baby? And we'll start with Dana.
So my advice for someone getting their first Lens Baby would be to put it on your camera. Just kidding. And shoot. It's funny because every time I put a new lens on my camera, I always start out by shooting super wide, because that's how I like to shoot, with a wide aperture. But with starting out with a Lens Baby, I recommend shooting at a narrow aperture until you adjust to getting the focus right. And then with the blur, I use the Composer Pro 2 and the Twist, or not the Twist, the Spark, with the interchangeable optics. And so there's tricks with the focusing. For instance, the Composer Pro 2, I've learned to kind of twist the focus ring to make it really blurry and then bring it into focus, blur, focus, and then I take the shot. And it's just my way of kind of triple checking that I've nailed focus or that I'm really seeing the focus. And then the third thing I would probably recommend is, it works for me with shooting Lens Baby, and I wish I had known this right out of the gate, is to shoot with my live view. It's easier for me to see that I've gotten focus on my live view as well versus through my viewfinder. So And again, my motto with Lens Baby is just embrace the imperfections and don't forget to have fun because you're creating, and the joy of the process, or the process of creating, should bring you joy, not just getting like straight out of camera award-winning shots. So.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice, because anyone who's been in photography for more than 8 seconds knows that this is a journey, is such a journey. That's a great piece of advice. Uta, what would be your advice for someone looking to get their very first Lens Baby?
So my advice would be prepared to have a ton of fun, and don't expect great pictures right away, but just jump in and try it and enjoy it. And I think if you allow yourself time to get to know your lens, you will eventually be surprised by a picture where you're like, oh my Lord, this is mind blowing. I didn't expect that. And then start venturing out, start analyzing that picture and think about what is mind-blowing for you. Is it the way the bokeh is shaped, or is it the way that you don't have focus where you wanted it, but all of a sudden the picture has like a very emotional response for you? So I think just to break with your traditional expectations, and be ready for a new experience. If you can deal with that, you're ready for Lens Baby.
Yeah, that's a very great point. Kathleen, what are your thoughts?
Two, really. If you are used to autofocus and have never used manual focus before, then the first thing I would advise you to do with the Lens Baby right out of the box is to check your camera's diopter to be sure it is set correctly for your vision, or you're going to get really frustrated at what you think looks in focus is not going to be in focus. So I would do that. The second thing is that beta testing Lens Babies is one of the greatest joys of my life. And so when I first get one, you know, I have no idea really what I'm going to be able to create with it. And one of the things that I always do is experiment with that lens and a subject at all the different apertures. Okay, that's really the only way you're going to learn what that lens can do at a particular aperture, if you try it. All right. And put them all together up on your screen and really look at them and look at the difference. Look at the progression of blur. Look what the lens can do. And I think the more you do that, and when you look at the images all together, you'll sort of find your thing. You know, I like really slim selective focus and a lot of blur. That's not going to be for everybody. But, you know, if you don't try it and try all the apertures, you won't truly learn what you can do with the lens.
Yeah. Great points. Anne, what are your thoughts?
Sorry, had to unmute there. I think be patient. You know, as you said, Michael, this is a journey and it's not going to come right away. And we have to embrace that. You know, we just need to get out there and experiment. I mean, that's probably my best advice is experiment. And I love what Kathleen says, because I always tell this to my students too, that shoot it in all the apertures, because that's going to help you learn what the lens can do and help you hone in on what your style is. So really explore that lens and every you know, possibility with it. But be patient, and as Dana said, have fun. If we aren't having fun in our photography, then why are we doing it?
Yeah, very solid point. Did anyone else have any thoughts on this question?
I'd like to piggyback on what Kathleen said and say to pay attention to your glasses. If you've got progressive glasses, it's really hard to look through a viewfinder and see what's going on manual focus wise. Like you can frame a shot and use autofocus, but you might want to look at getting a separate pair of just single vision glasses at a, you know, I guess single vision, whatever your doctor says is single vision. And these are my single vision for the computer screen. And in general, I like looking through single vision better than progressive lenses. But when you put a camera up to your eye, you've kind of got to adjust, you know, where you're looking through the lens in order to see what's in focus. And then when you're trying to line that up with a slice of focus or a spot of focus, it can get very difficult.
I actually just wanted to add something in. So just going back with that, what I do when I was learning how to use my edge, because it's the slice of focus, and I really wanted the fine tuning of where my focus really falls accurately. I used to just go back and upload those images to my computer and then look at it that way and then see, okay, I took these 10 shots by shifting my focus just very little, and then just seeing, okay, so this is where the focus fell. And I think it just kind of really helps me just putting my images back on my computer as well, and then learning things that way. And then, if you're learning focusing, another huge tip, I think, if you photograph kids and people, human subjects, try to practice on still life and non-moving objects if you can, because so many times people come to me and they go that, okay, I've started using the Sol 45, but I cannot nail the focus, and I'm using this for my 1-year-old. Like, no, let's not get started with that first, because 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds are always going to be moving anyway. So try to understand how the lens works and where the focus falls by just practicing on an object that doesn't move and listens to you. So.
Yeah, that's a great point, because things that can't talk back, right?
Right.
Joe, and this next question is actually for you from Anitra. How do I get the best focus for portraits when I'm using the Sol 45?
Yeah, so I love using the Sol 45 for portraits, and because it's the center focus, it's the central focus point. I pretty much, again, just play with the focusing for my Sol 45 whenever I use it. But what has helped me, at least the way I like it, because I like moody portraiture, I like to work with it on darker backgrounds so that there is really no distractions or anything else in the background. If it's like a plain, simple background, it helps me to see exactly where I'm focusing on. And then I pretty much just adjust myself spatially, like going forward, going backwards. If I want the subject's eyes in focus, because if you're photographing a portrait, that's where you would typically be focusing on, then I would just literally, push, go forward, go backwards. And I'm really not a still photographer who just stands and then starts to start snapping. So I would just really use the space where I am in, and not just only working by moving the focus ring, but actually moving myself too, to make sure that I have the proper light, I have the proper composition, because sometimes I think if you're working on the focusing element, the light and the composition and all of the basics of photography just go out the window. And you're like, oh my gosh, I need to get the focus right. And you just forget everything else. But it's a package deal, right? Because you need to look at all of them, all of those elements together. So just making sure that, get your focus right, practice your focus on a non-moving object, know exactly what that Sol 45 does in terms of your focus. And say if you have a blank wall, and that's where you're trying to focus, take a photograph of a portrait, like you're trying to do a portrait, then maybe place a flower vase in that spot. Take a photo and then replace that with the human subject so that you know exactly what you will be getting. So that's what I would do, at least if you're someone who's just getting started with the Sol 45. And I really like the fixed aperture. I mean, I think for me, because I like the whole underexposed look, it really works beautifully with a pocket of light, especially like harsh light. I think the Sol 45 just does a beautiful job. I just place my subject in a pocket of light and expose for the highlights that is exposed for my subject who is in that pocket of light. And the fixed aperture does its work. And, I just adjust the shutter speed and I'm good to go. So yeah, so my Sol 45 is my to-go for portraits.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I often think about, we're working within the parameters of the equipment that we have. And this comes back to many of your points in that, learn that lens, understand that lens, be able to be best friends with that lens. And you will discover in time, obviously being patient, a very important virtue in this process, that in every situation, you're going to be able to understand, how do I adjust? How do I get to that place that I find the focus that either I want or that I need. And I think finding focus is one of the questions that we get the most when it comes to Lens Baby lenses, because as a manual lens, many people have not stepped in that foray. And so one of the questions, this is an open question to the panel, is when you are first discovering how to use manual focus, what are some tips?
So I would like to answer that question because I have one point that wasn't covered yet. When I want to make sure with clients that I really get my focus right, what I do is instead of capturing just one shot, I set my camera to multiple exposures with hitting the shutter button once. And that way I make sure that I at least have one picture where I have focus where I need it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Does anyone else have any thoughts on finding focus with a Lens Baby? Jackie?
Yes, one of the things is some people have focus peaking on their cameras, which is very helpful. And I also personally like to do what Dana mentioned. I do a lot of flowers and I don't usually use a tripod out in the field. So what I do is I just put the strap around my neck and gently pull the camera against it and shoot in live view and use the magnification so that I can really see what's going on. And also I wanted to mention that I see a lot of people starting at extremes, extremely wide open and extreme tilts. And it's their first Lens Baby and they don't understand and they get frustrated too easily. Start straight, start without a tilt, and don't start wide open, especially if it's your first, and don't throw things away. Because that's the beauty of Lens Baby is when you see things in Lightroom or whatever you're editing in, it's quite surprising and beautiful. So I think those are my tips.
Yeah.
I just had one more thing to add. So because I do quite a bit of self-portraits with Lens Baby lenses too, that is one of the most, most asked question for me as to focusing on any, human subjects or non-human subjects itself is difficult when you get started with the Lens Baby lens, especially when you've never used manual focusing. So how do you get the focusing, when you're turning the camera on yourself? So to me, one thing that has actually helped is just put a blue tape. I use just the blue tape on a wall, and I would put it where I think I want my focus to be, and I would go stand in that spot. So, I mean, you have objects and things that you could also place, but I've figured that, having that blue tape, because it's small enough, but it's also seen, really helps you to narrow that focus, especially if you're using, edge or sol, where the focusing can be really, it's just a matter of like fine tuning, and your focus doesn't really fall on the soft edges, but, it's more sharper. So I don't know, it may help someone.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I used to do a lot of self-portraiture as well, and it is a trial by fire for sure. So, as you're doing that, and especially finding that focus, that's a great tip. One of the things I used to do as well. Does anyone else have any thoughts on finding focus with Lens Baby? Kathleen?
Yeah, two things. If you're shooting macro with your Lens Babies, then be sure that you are not closer than the minimum focus distance of your lens or optic. All right, I see that a lot in workshops. Let's say you're using the Sweet 50 and without adding macro, the minimum focus distance is 15 inches. So if you're in 7 inches away from your subject, you're not going to get focus. I'm not going to get focus. Nobody is. The other thing is that when you're tilting, remember a little bend goes a long way. Okay, you don't have to tilt to the edge of the frame. You don't really want the focus on the edge of the frame anyway. So small tilts off center.
Yeah, great.
I think also with the velvets, that's a whole separate issue with focusing. I think one of the big mistakes that happens when people are trying to learn focus with any of the 3 velvets is that they focus wide open, and you're going to have so much glow in there if you're focusing at 1.6, 1.8 that you're not going to be able to see the focus. So make sure you're doing your focusing at f4, or some people like f5.6. Establish your focus, and then you can start playing with aperture and changing it. But you're not going to be able to see it if you're wide open. So I have so many people that email me that question, you know, I can't get the focus with my velvet. What am I doing wrong? And it's usually because of trying to focus in those lower apertures.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually a great transition into our next question from Linda. And Linda asks, I just bought the Velvet 28. I want to learn how to use it better. Can you give me any tips? And that one, Anne, if you wouldn't mind, what are your thoughts?
The Velvet 28 is such an amazing, brilliant lens because, you know, you can go from shooting macro at as close as 2 inches and you can have, you know, amazing glow in those lower apertures, but then you can, you know, shoot wide angle landscapes with it and go to complete sharpness from edge to edge. So I think, you know, again, it's just a matter of doing that same thing of experimenting with apertures, trying different things, shoot some macro and then turn around and shoot a landscape and try it in all the apertures. I actually love shooting my Velvet 28 in those lower apertures and getting that sort of magical fairy tale look to a landscape. But I've also seen work where, you know, it's shot at f/16 or at f/22 that's just amazingly sharp. So I think the beauty of that lens is that you have so much versatility. It's, you know, I'm excited to travel with that lens because, you know, I can do a landscape and then I can turn around and do a macro. So, but experiment again. I think that's just the key to so much about Lens Baby.
Yeah, that's a great point. Does anyone else have thoughts on the Velvets?
I'd say with the Velvet 28, and especially if you're shooting wide open, use the focus scale. Like first go out, put it on a tripod, make sure that the focus scale is what you think it is, that 6 feet is 6 feet and 30 feet is 30 feet and, you know, 12 inches is 12 inches. Once you get closer than about 3 feet, the focus scale is less effective. But I generally am just looking down at my lens and seeing that, hey, I'm about 12 feet from my subject and I know that the scale is accurate here. And so I'm just going to set it there and until my subject moves, I don't really worry about focusing. And that makes things much quicker. Also with the Velvet 28, the underlying detail at the brightest apertures is very, very sharp. It's got a concentration of the energy inside of that glow that is very small, like 90% or 80% of that energy is inside in, you know, if you shoot a star, you get this big glowy halo around it, but the center of that halo is the star, or is what you would expect with a normal lens. And so you try to utilize that, because the other velvets in the corner, they're not so clean in terms of that concentration of energy. In the center they are. But how can you use that that edge-to-edge underlying detail in your images? You know, and this is the next step after you've kind of learned the lens. But just keep that in mind, that the Velvet 28, like Anne said, you can stop it down and get corner-to-corner sharpness. But even wide open, your underlying detail is very sharp. So keep that in mind.
Craig, one of the things that I think is really important, because for many photographers who are probably watching this who are just now experimenting and learning manual focus, they don't know what a focus scale is. Can you break that down for us real quick?
Sure, let me see if I've got something here. Well, this old Nikon 50, what was that? No, this old Nikon 50, you can see right here, we've got meters and feet. And so when you're looking down on your lens, especially if you're shooting using the LCD or the back viewfinder tilted out like a view camera, you're also looking down on the top of your lens where you've got the meters and feet. And so lining up the indicator, the line on the lens with your meters or feet with what you see or estimate is your distance to your subject is what I'm talking about.
Got it. Thanks. And I think that'd be really helpful for a lot of people who are just now discovering this. One of the most beautiful things about Lens Baby is we get to make magic in our cameras, right? We get to see live what is happening. In traditional standard photography, not so much. course, we can take it into post-processing and play with it and create things there. But so much of this journey is doing it in camera. Now, that said, I always look at photography and all the different assets that we have at our disposal as tools. And one of those tools is post-processing. And we have an amazing question from Jen. And Jen asks, what post-processing tools are best for LensBaby? Jackie, what are your thoughts?
I would say anything. I don't see why you would have to have a preference. If you like Lightroom and Photoshop, that's my preference. But that's I don't think that I would change my workflow because I'm shooting with a LensBaby rather than a traditional lens. If you like to apply Topaz to it or any of the Nik plugins or Capture One or anything, I think you can achieve whatever you want. And I think what you alluded to, Michael, is that we get so much in camera that we'd have to do very little in post-processing. I know my session in this is all centered around post-processing, but that's just because all these amazing images come in through the LensBaby, and I just combine them in Photoshop in artistic ways. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I always do that. So my LensBaby images require very, very little. The colors and the way Craig described the velvet effects with the glow, I don't want to remove that. I want to accentuate it, and it takes very, very little to really kind of make it, bring out its best.
Yeah, great points. Does anyone else have thoughts? Uta?
I can only agree with what Jackie just said. I feel the same. I do very little in post-processing, and I know my puppy is super annoying, so I guess I cut it for now, all right?
No problem. That's the world that we live in right now, and I think it's both hilarious and, one of those things that we go, all right, it is what it is. Does anyone else have any thoughts about post-processing? Dana?
So I agree with Jackie as well that the LensBaby lenses do a lot of the work, and because I like to shoot really emotive, moody type portraits and portraiture, the lens does a lot of the work for me, but I also like that when I pull it in, my post-processing program is Lightroom mostly. There are certain tools that I like to use. Obviously, I do a lot of black and white photography, so converting it to black and white. And then the clarity and texture sliders, I love the way those pair with LensBaby lenses. So the new texture slider, newish, in LensBaby adds something kind of extra, I guess, gritty to the blur. So that's something I commonly do. And again, the clarity, I love using the clarity brush on where my focus fell. I'm just brushing a bit of clarity to kind of draw more attention to that. But I completely agree that those are probably my easiest images to post-process is my LensBaby lenses, because it's infused all the mood for me already. I just have to kind of tweak a few things.
Yeah, amazing.
I'd like to add, regardless of what you use, go into your, like Kathleen said, use all of your apertures when you're out shooting, but also when you're in post-processing, take that slider, go all the way with it. Don't be shy. Whether it's your white balance or your contrast or your saturation, vibrance, whatever it is, even the clarity is really fun. You go all the way to the left, and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on there? And, but go all the way, see what each of those do, and then find what it is that you connect with in software. LensBaby is a tool. And then if you combine that with other tools, you can really make that sing in a way that reflects the way you want to represent your vision of the world.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Such a great point. As we continue to move on here, the next question, and Shelley, I'm going to ask this to you, is how do you get the person, place, or thing that is in front of your camera exactly the way that you want it?
I love that question because I don't. I read that. I'm like, it's a journey. It's an exploration. It's a happy moment. It's a happy accident. It's always you just never know what you're going to get with a lens baby. You take it out in the field, you put your subject out there. I'm lucky my subject doesn't move unless it's falling over, and that's on me. And you just play with it. And unlike Kathleen, I do crank my as much as I can. I want my focus way over to the side. I mean, I play with it. I did like what Craig did when I first got going with photography, is I got on an iPad and I just edited all my stuff there, and I cranked everything to every side and just blew it all up, and then figured out what I wanted and brought it all back. And so I think that's what you have to do, is you have to just go crazy and then rein it into something that reflects you. So when I go out in the field and I take my toys and we're out having an adventure, it's I have a vision. I put my lens on, I take the photo, and what I get is somewhere else, and I'm always happy with that. That was a ridiculous answer, but we're going to go with it.
No, but it's so true, right? And often we walk into these situations with an expectation of, I'm going to put this here, I'm going to do that, that thing's going to be there. But circumstance often shows up, and we recognize, like, we have to pivot, we have to make adjustments, we have to be willing to say, okay, this isn't what I wanted when I stepped into this, but it's even better now. Or sometimes it's worse. And that's the reality of this entire thing, is it's a process, right?
Absolutely.
Did anyone else have any thoughts on? Go ahead. Anyone else have any thoughts on how you get that thing in front of your camera exactly how you want?
I would say go in with a vision and be willing to walk away with a different vision. Every once in a while I go in and I get exactly what I was after, but 99 times out of 100, I walk away with something unexpected. And it's great to have an expectation and to know what you want. But then you have to be able to bend and shift and head in different directions along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so much of what it is, right? Being willing to see what happens. The next question is for the entire panel. How do you find your style? And I think that we'll start with Joe on this one. How do you find your style? One of the things that's really beautiful as someone who gets to see all of your work all of the time is that I get a look and go, I know who took that photo. And I also know that as a photographer, it takes a very long time to get to that place. And so I'm so curious, how do you find your style? And we'll start with Joe.
Yeah, so it definitely takes a lot of time and a lot of practice. But more importantly, I think from personal experience, it is more about connecting with yourself and figuring out what exactly you like and who you are as a person, so that your images reflect that. Because if you just pick up the camera and you don't really have a vision, but you're just out there because you just want to take an image, I mean, it can be fun in the beginning, but you're just shooting without really a purpose. So if you really want your images to have a purpose, a vision, a story, and I'm always emphasizing story in my work, you just have to know what you are really drawn to the most. And that takes time. Like, I mean, like 5 years ago, I know I was drawn to, oh my gosh, this is so bright and airy and so beautiful. Like, this is so beautiful. I would look at dark and moody portraits and I'm like, this is beautiful too. How do I figure out what exactly I am drawn to? So I think just tuning in with yourself and maybe doing everything, just like how Craig mentioned, with how you may play around with post-processing, but also if you are really a new beginner shooter, like with your camera, just, take portraits, take lifestyle images, shoot flowers, shoot whatever you can, and do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I think just doing that, you will, in the process, be able to connect with yourself to see what you like. And just like I said, for me, I have always been drawn to just the whole moodier work with like textures and just the soft blur. I really like the soft blur. And that didn't come right away. Just the more I did that, and I would play with something and I'm like, oh, okay, this is what I really like, not that. So then I would do things like, if I picked, say, my Sol 45, I would be like, oh, this is what I did. And this is what I really fell in love with. So which means I need to do more of this. So just, figuring that out is the more important part. The other thing I think would be, just regardless of what lens or camera, whatever you use, learn to be a better photographer also, because that is also, the most important thing. Learn about light, learn about composition, and all of that again comes with practice, because all of those technical elements combined together, if you have them straightened out, everything else becomes, easier. I mean, I wouldn't say easy, but it becomes much more easier, because Lens Baby is a tool, and having all those technical elements worked out will really help you explore your creativity and find what you are drawn to, or find your voice much more.
Yeah, those are all incredible tips, Joe. Does anyone else have any thoughts on finding your style? Jackie, oh, you all do. Okay, we're going to get everybody. Jackie, go ahead.
Yeah, I would love to talk about this, because it's something that comes up often in conversations about, I recognized your image, I knew it was yours, and my initial reaction is, but how? I don't think I have a style, and I'm kind of proud of the fact that I do a lot of different things, and I like to bring out the mood or the personality in my subject. And if my subject is dark and more mysterious, that's what I want to convey. If it's not about the mood that I'm in necessarily, it's about my subject, whether it's a person or a flower. And I kind of liken this to a buffet of food. So if I went to a buffet and there was Italian, Greek, fish, Indian food, what am I going to be drawn to? Am I going to sample everything? More often than not, I probably am. But there's some people that are always going to only go for lobster, only going to go for spaghetti or lasagna. And if you're that kind of person, then you should do what makes you happy. I think that, when doctors tell us that we have to avoid certain foods for our health, that's one thing, but that does set limitations and parameters on our choices. And I want to say that, but also draw the distinction between judges of photography and doctors who are trying to keep us healthy. Judges of photography try to tell us what they think, and they're judging based on their own parameters, on their own likes and dislikes. And if they like things sharp or totally in focus, then they're probably not going to fall for my Lens Baby images, and that's okay, because I don't have to live by what judges say or what they think. And so if I fall flat in any kind of a competition, it's totally fine with me, because I shoot for myself. And
that's such a great point.
So my style is all over the map. And so I can't say that I have a cohesive website, but I can actually say that I have subcategories. And so I have some that are more of the floral pastels, and I have some that are dark and moody. I have some that are more the elegant, and then I have the wild. And so within each one, I have those categories, but I don't think overall I have a certain style. But that's the way I view myself, is that I don't want to be boxed in.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I resonate with that, and I'm sure many people appreciate that. Dana, what are your thoughts?
I love this conversation. I'm going to echo some of what Joe said, that I agree that it takes a lot of time to get to a place where you've really found your style, or, as we hear a lot in the photography world, your voice. That thing that kind of someone can look at your photos and say, I know who took that. That's your voice coming through, or, parts of you. And for me, I'm going to get a little vulnerable here, because it's the only way I know how to answer this question. But I, shot things for a long time that didn't necessarily make my soul sing, like really bring joy to my heart that I was capturing. And so I kind of took a step back and looked at my work, as a whole, and looked for themes in my work. And themes that I saw in my work were, I shoot mostly children, photograph mostly children. So I saw themes of wonder and magic and just a sense of like peace, and then a sense of vibrance and playfulness. And for me, it came down to really figuring out my why for why I do what I do. And figuring out that why for me was a huge step forward in just capturing what it is that really makes me feel like I'm creating art from a deep place within. And just to end, my husband and I did foster care for a lot of years. We fostered about 15 different children in the Portland metro area over the course of about 5 years. So that was a big part of my why, because I saw one side of childhood that wasn't pretty and magical and colorful and playful. It was very sad. And then I see the other side of childhood, with my own children growing up in a home full of love and their needs are met. And so that is a big part of me finding my style, is really seeing those themes and capturing those moments from a place of, this is why I do what I do. I want to capture how beautiful and magical childhood can be. So I know I'm getting really deep and introspective, but that's kind of where I've landed.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Like I think about it like having purpose and intention. What drives us in this place where, unfortunately, this can become mundane. Being a photographer, doing it all the time, it can become this thing where we feel like, why am I doing this? Why am I showing up? And having something that I feel like is greater than us can often be that catalyst for continuing to push forward and being willing to step into identifying and creating. And whether or not style comes from that, I think that's a side point when the intention is about, how do I do something that's for me or for others that brings value to the world? So that's really beautiful. Anne, I know you had some thoughts about style.
Yeah, this is like my favorite conversation in the world. And in fact, my presentation is really all about kind of this idea of finding your heart. And to me, that is very connected with finding your style. So I think that when we begin this journey of photography, and we really do have to look at it as a journey, and one that happens in small increments. But when we begin, we take in a lot of influences from other people. We gather ideas. We are inspired by all kinds of things. And then at some point, I realized in my journey that I just had to start trusting myself and trusting my heart and trusting the way I emotionally reacted to my subjects. And I think, that a lot of that comes from really honoring where you come from in life and taking all your life experiences. Just, what Dana was saying about how, she's seen both sides of childhood, taking those ideas, and seeing how they feed into your photography, because I believe that our photography really becomes a culmination of everything we've experienced in our life, all the way back to our childhood. And if you can begin to look at that, it'll help bring your heart into the process. So I know that for my own personal life, the reason that I love doing what I love is that I have a very deep connection to nature that started in my childhood. And I also have a career as an art therapist, which really influences the way I see my subjects, the way I connect, the way I, want to photograph emotionally. So by honoring our past and our journey, we can bring our heart into our photography. So watch my presentation, it's all there.
Very, very, very well said, Anne. Thank you so much. Craig, I know you have thoughts.
Well, I think this is an interesting way. We're all kind of coming at this from a different direction than the visual side. Like we're not saying, go try this particular lens or try this certain thing, but the foundation that I'm hearing that I resonate with is find out what's important to you. Like, what do you care about? What do you see? The things that you see, those are the things that you have a history with, those things that you notice day after day after day, that you have some vested interest in understanding. So find out what you see and then explore, how do I see it? How do I see it in a way that communicates the truth of that subject matter to your viewers?
Great points. Anyone else have any thoughts on finding your style? Kathleen?
I think it's important not to think of style as a destination. I think you need to understand that style is a process, and it's going to ebb and flow. And, you know, your style today may not be your style from 6 months ago. It might not be your style for, you know, 6 months ahead. You need to experiment, enjoy the process, and I don't think you especially need to categorize yourself with a particular style.
Yeah, very valid point. And that kind of harkens to what Jackie said. So much of this is about just going with what's present for you. And I fear that as the photography industry continues to change and adapt, that people are afraid of that, which kind of leads into our next question is, how do you put yourself in a position, and maybe this steps into the vulnerability piece of it, how do you put yourself in a position to be willing to go against the grain in an industry that has kind of laid out the baseline of what is acceptable? This is an open question for the panel, so please, anyone who would like to answer that. Kathleen, go ahead.
Oh, well, I think you need to stop shooting for other people if that's an issue. There's only one person that my work really needs to please, and that's me. You know, it's nice if you get likes, you know, on Facebook. It's nice if other people like your work, but I have a lot of images that I truly love that really don't resonate with a lot of people, and that's okay. You know, so shoot for yourself. You know, and just keep a part of your work for contests, camera clubs, where things have to be more pigeonholed into a particular style. But keep your heart and yourself open to shoot for you.
Yeah, really great point. And so much of that is about you. Shelley, what are your thoughts?
I couldn't agree more. And I don't shoot for camera clubs or competitions. I shoot for myself, and I shoot for myself. That's who I shoot for. And when I look through the camera and I take a photo and it makes me happy, or better yet, it makes me laugh, that's all I care about. Everything else is gravy. And everything that everyone is saying about digging deep, telling your own stories, expressing your joy, your pain, whatever that is in your photographs, that is what it's all about. That's how you found your style.
Yeah. Uta, yes.
So the puppy is sleeping. We can talk again. Finally on my lap. I wanted to say, for me, it was actually important to let go of everything for a long time. So I tried too hard to find my style for a long time. And then I gave up, you know, and I was like, okay, fine. I don't know what it is. And then I did what a lot of people have said here before. I started shooting for myself. I just did capture pictures that were interesting for me. And I really stopped publishing pictures for a long time. And that helped me to find my style and to allow myself to do what I actually want to do, instead of trying to please other people and to pretend I have a style at a stage where I didn't have a style.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Joe?
I just wanted to say that this is such a great conversation. I actually teach a workshop that's all about rule breaking, and just all different ways to break rules and just kind of go away from like traditional way of doing things. So this is like my absolute favorite topic. For me, just going back to what Shelley and Kathleen said as well about shooting for yourself, even if I'm shooting, say, clients, I try to make sure that I'm using my Lensbaby lenses, even though they may have never seen an image produced that way, you know? So, and then when it comes to personal work, obviously there's a little bit more that you could do when it comes to personal work with getting creative. For me, I get bored super fast. So I'm a person that I just get bored so fast. So I always have to keep changing things and coming up with new ways to do, even if I say take a portrait with my H35 and a month later, I am like, okay, this is too easy. What do I do next? What do I change about my lens that can make the image appear different? Or what do I do different in that same space? Because I often shoot in the same space. When it comes to photographing my kids indoors, I'm in the same room, like, all the year, and especially with COVID too, right? So I'm always trying to come up with new ways, whether it is going back to the photography basics, or whether it's tapping into the emotions, of my kids, me, or anyone whom I am photographing. Just going back to this very emotions, and like how Dana talked about, just exploring your why of what you are doing. I think just digging back to that really helps you to get more creative and to keep challenging yourself to experiment, basically.
Yeah, that's a solid point, which kind of actually leads into the next question. And this one's for Craig to start with. And of course, all of you can please interject. Craig, talk about the value of personal projects.
Well, Lens Baby is a personal project, and I think it goes back to what we were just talking about, that find something that's important to you and find something that's accessible to you and make some progress. If you're thinking about going, your personal project is traveling someplace that you're not going to be able to travel right now, or you've got this thing out on the horizon that may not be possible because of your circumstances or because of the world circumstances, that tends to be, and I say that because I've lived in that space of, hey, I want to go photograph in the jungles of Brazil or Peru or whatnot, and while I've done that, it took years to get there, and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and yes, it was great, but it was a very short amount of time. And so finding something close to home and being able to go there, go back to it on a daily basis, or over the course of the summertime, or whenever it is, when you can say, hey, I'm going to spend a month with this lens, I'm going to do, challenge myself in a certain way. It is going to be limiting. Similarly to Uta and her project with the Velvet 28, personal projects, you can't leave them super wide open. So find your paradigms that you're saying I'm staying within, and then go do it and push those paradigms and try and make that work for you. I think if we go with a satchel full of lenses and 3 bodies, and am I going to shoot video or I'm going to shoot stills? I don't know. Am I going to shoot black and white? And we get all bogged down. So make those decisions before you ever find yourself out shooting, so that you've got a limited palette to work with, and come back and evaluate. If that's working, great, continue that and continue to push it. Does it challenge you? Is it accessible? Documenting our lives, documenting the people that are closest to us. If you want to do portraiture, photograph your partner, your kids, or your neighbors, or the people that you see at work on a regular basis. Like get out of your comfort zone with your camera, but be in a space that's accessible. Be with people, be with a subject matter that you know or that you want to know better.
Yeah, and it sounds to me like the way to step into that might be like having a little bit of intention, coming back to the why and that reason. One of the things that I'm curious about as we step into this idea of personal projects is, how do you really challenge yourself in that, right? Because so many of us, we have our side jobs, we have our day jobs, photography is a hobby, maybe it's even our profession. When you are surrounded by so much life, what does it take to really step into a personal project? Does anybody have any thoughts? Jackie.
I would love to. This is a topic that's near and dear to me, because I try to encourage everybody to live their legacy rather than leaving a legacy. And in doing so, I think that you can create a personal project that can be small and finite, or it can be large and long lasting. And it's whatever you can do. If you're working full time and you've got a lot of kids at home, then maybe you can only do one small thing. But I think more than anything, it needs to be meaningful. I think a personal project that's legacy building can be just one step along the way. It doesn't have to be something that you take on and you do forever. But as long as it's something that means something to you, whether you touch somebody with it, whether you make a statement or send a message It could be about the world. It could be about the environment. It could be about your family. It could be about almost anything. And it might just be for yourself. It might be for a neighbor. It might be for a group of people. But I think the result really needs to be that you're making a difference in someone's life, whether it's your own, one other person's, or many other people, something that you feel is important. And the photography is really just a tool. And I think it's an opportunity for us to say, what is important to me? What do I want to take? Do I want to take a stand on something, or do I want to reach out and touch someone? It could be that your neighbor is at the hospital and you're going to take pictures of her hydrangea bush because she's missing the bloom. We have people in my florography group online that do all kinds of things like that. Others create, something that is intended to bring light and to uplift others in the world. And some people want to send a message about the importance of fill in the blank, whatever it is. And I think that it's a great way for us to say, well, I'm going to take this topic, whatever it means, and I'm going to use X lenses or optics, like Craig mentioned. And you really can say, this is an opportunity for me to learn how to do videography, or to really push the Velvet 28 in all of its ranges. And Michael's a rainbow. Is he a rainbow for everybody else?
Yes.
This is the way I see him every day.
Yeah, there we go.
That's the legacy. So anyway, that kind of is how I would answer it. Is a personal project can really make a difference in your life and in other people's lives as well. And at the same time, it can really push your photography beyond.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Dana.
A personal project for me is usually born out of my need to slow down, because I feel like, just for me personally as a mom of 5, and I'm just going all the time, trying to take the pictures and school the kids and raise the kids. And so my last few personal projects have been born out of just taking a portrait a month of my children. And then it takes the pressure off of me of needing to capture a ton of stuff. I just can kind of slow down and hone in on this one thing. And sometimes personal projects come on a whim, to take pressure off of myself, and again, to slow down. We went on this epic family vacation pre-pandemic that was over a month long, and I packed a bag full of all my Lens Baby gear, all my lenses, my camera, just like I should have had that backpack insured. And we got to where we were going. We spent, some time in Hawaii for an extended amount of time. And we got there, and it was too much pressure for me. I was like, we've planned this trip for, this amount of time, and I just want to be present with my family. And so literally spur of the moment, the first day I was like, I'm going to make this a cell phone adventure, and I'm going to capture this trip magically and artistically with my cell phone. And I'm not at that time was not an iPhone photographer. So I guess my point is, I never opened my camera bag one time on that whole trip. It was just a project was born out of this need to just kind of slow down and be present and take the pressure off of myself. And it forced me to learn a new skill. And, I'm glad I took that risk, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. And, it reminds me of something Chase Jarvis once said, and that's the best camera is the one with you, right? Sometimes it's not about all the gear. It's not about the 12 lenses. It's not about, and that stuff gets in the way sometimes. Let's be honest. Like, I don't know about you guys. I carried a 70-200 on a Canon 5D Mark III for a whole day one time. My neck hurt so bad the next day I couldn't move it, right? As we wrap up and head towards the end of our conversation here, one of the questions that came up, which I think is really interesting, and this is open again to the entire panel, but I think that we will start with Dana, is what does the future of photography look like in your eyes?
Wow. No pressure. I know y'all are glad you didn't go first right now. Can you say the question one more time?
Yeah, what does the future of photography for you look like?
For me, the future of photography, that's an interesting question for me, because I photograph mostly my own children, who are not going to be small children, amazed at the wonder of the world, for, forever, right? They're growing. And so the future of photography for me looks like exploring new genres of photography. As Anne was saying, kind of continuing to explore and find my heart, you know, as my life continues to change and things evolve. And just continuing to shoot for myself and enjoy the creative process and continue in my journey to let go of perfection and just create because it's what I love to do and it brings me joy.
Yeah, powerful. Anyone else have thoughts about the future of photography? I know Craig does.
Well, I also wonder what the future of Lens Baby is going to bring for us too. You know, I feel like it's hard to predict the future because, you know, yes, obviously I want to continue what I'm doing for as long as I can do it, but I also want to be open to the moment and open to possibilities and new lenses and new ways of seeing the world. So, you know, I think it's just not, there's nothing static about this process. It's always evolving. It's always changing. So, yeah, I'm excited about what the future will bring.
Well, and I think we're looking at the future of photography right here. Who would think that we'd be at a multi-thousand person conference with people all over the world on Zoom? And how are we going to present ourselves here? How, you know, I think we're going to see, you know, webcams become something different than they are right now. Cell phones back in 2006, 2008, my business partner and I went to a InfoTrends meeting, and they talked about how it's, you know, people are really going to be migrating from SLRs to cell phones. And I came out of the meeting and I said, never going to happen, never. And now you look at it and, you know, I thought it'd be like incremental changes. And within 3 or 4 years, we were talking 8 megapixels. And now, you know, the megapixels don't matter so much once you hit 12, and you've got HDR built into your phone that is still a pain to do on most DSLRs. Like, you know, it's not so much about megapixels as it is about the information from the highlights to the shadows. And so there's this ever evolving movement, and the fact that you know, everything does video now. It's 4K. Like, who's ever going to watch it on a 4K screen? Like, you know, nobody except the person that edited it, essentially. So the constant evolution and change is it's hard to predict. 2008, I said, no way will a cell phone in any way, you know, get somebody that's shooting on a 36 by 24 inch sensor to take real pictures with it. Now, you know, that was disproven. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell what's next, but I do think that it's constantly going to evolve. It's constantly going to change. And what we're doing right here in 2-3 years, we're going to have options that we don't currently have. You know, me having a green screen behind me and going out and filming stuff out of focus with my Lens Baby Twist is an option, but it's not accessible to everybody because most of our screens or our cameras aren't going to, you know, be that great. You know, I'm using a DSLR. So those things are going to become those things are going to become accessible that aren't right now, and it's just going to become part of the language. Apple targeted photography and said, we're going to take this over, and in so doing, they made photography the language of the youth. Like my teenage boys, like that's how they communicate. Is it inspired when they're keeping a thread or whatever it's called, a streak going on you know, whatever that thing is that they do? No, usually not. But it is a language. It's a visual language that wasn't there 10 years ago, and that's just going to develop. And we're right at the beginning of that.
Yeah, I think about that all the time. Like, even though photography is this thing that's 100 years old, and many of us have been doing it for a very long time, it's ever evolving. Like the fact that I now carry a camera with me everywhere I go in my phone, which, to be honest with you, is my preference in shooting these days, is amazing. Because again, I don't have to lug around the gear. Does anyone else have any thoughts about the future of photography?
I think also just,
go ahead.
well, I was just going to say that I think also having things make a comeback. Just for example, like I remember someone posted an image of an in-flare camera image, in-camera flare. And from what I know is, most of these traditional lenses, like Canon or anything else or Nikon, the gear is all the lenses are trying to be super sharp, right? Because everyone just wants to have the crispest, the clearest, the sharpest image. And here we are like, okay, embrace the blur. So I think, and then bring in camera flares, because that is my personal favorite, especially, with the lenses that, that I use. So I'm like, just having those things that you never thought that would make a comeback. I think just seeing those things come back is also something that is interesting.
Yeah. A very, very valid point. It's even, you kind of see happening in fashion trends and trends all around the world right now. And, I think that can be a very potent tool to get to this place where we recognize that my hope for the future of photography is that it doesn't always have to be tack sharp and clean. Let's do what we do as creatives and experiment and show weird stuff and like step into it, right? I think about as Lensbaby, the brand, this idea of shoot extraordinary, that is self-defined. Who gets to say what extraordinary means but us as creatives? And so I want to say thank you to the panel. You guys are all amazing. And as I ask my last question, I just want to reiterate to everyone watching at the Shoot Extraordinary Conference how appreciative we are of you being here with us. The last question, and this is for the entire panel, and we will start with Craig, is if you could leave one piece of advice for someone about using Lensbaby, what would it be?
Limit your options. Go out, shoot with one aperture, point straight ahead if you've got a tiltable Lensbaby, and see what it does. And when you've found whether that resonates with you, go out and try a different one. But just limit your options. There's so many things, like Dana said, of getting to Hawaii and having this bag full of stuff. Don't get overwhelmed. Just choose one thing, limit it, and go out and see what you can make.
Great points. Jackie.
Well, I kind of asked myself a question, is Lensbaby a gift? Because I think it is, but I answered it myself. No, it's actually a reward. It's a reward for being nimble, for working hard, for taking risks. And I think that the one thing that I would like to leave everybody with is to be your authentic self. Work hard and you will be rewarded.
Shelley.
I say don't give up. I gave up on my first Lensbaby after about 6 months. I'm like, I can't do this. And when I went back to it, it clicked. So I'd say just stick with it. If there's a learning curve, take all this amazing advice that was given by all these amazing photographers and live it and live your own story.
Kathleen.
Shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot. Sort of what Craig said, shoot different subjects, shoot wide, shoot far, shoot up close. You're not going to master anything if you don't use it.
True. Uta.
Well, I almost want to say use all the options. I feel Lensbaby is like a rainbow, and if you are used to writing with a pen or a pencil, and all of a sudden you get all these options with Lensbaby, and it feels like you have so many more colors, use it, play with it, be like a child. Don't take it too serious in the beginning and have fun while you do it.
Yeah, great points. Anne.
Find your heart. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to stay with your subject and really fully explore it. Just experiment, 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 and look at things from different angles and shoot in different ways. And what happens when you do that is you have those aha moments, you have those bits of creative ideas that enter the picture. So stay with it and really work it.
Joe.
I would just go back to reiterating what most of you all have said about practice. Just practice as much as you can. And for me, it is about just picking up one lens and getting, just using it for 30 days, 60 days, whatever your time frame is, but making sure that you use it completely till you exhaust every option available to you with that lens. And the second tip I think I would just also add is to take notes. I am more of an old school way where I actually write down things as well. You could, take mental notes. You could write down to see, okay, this is what happened when I did this. Or you could save all your, 10, 20 shots that you've taken, download it to your computer, and then take notes that way. Because I tend to study my images quite a bit just to see, okay, this is what I have done. Maybe this is what I need to do next time. So just looking back at your own work will help you realize, and it's not really a mistake, but you're all learning, right? So it's about, figuring out what you can do better the next time. So.
And Dana.
Well, I've already said this, but I'm going to say it again. It would be to embrace the imperfections. So my favorite quote, which I said in my video for the conference, is don't shoot what a moment looks like, shoot what it feels like. And these lenses allow me to do that. And so I think if what you are creating is resonating with you as the artist, with how you're feeling in that moment, just embrace it.
I love it. Great, great, great advice and tips. And I will leave you with this Shoot Extraordinary Conference. Photography is a gift for you, and only you get to determine what that means. And just as all of these incredible speakers and educators have shared with you today, that starts by doing. And I challenge you all to do a little bit more today. Shoot Extraordinary Conference, thank you so much. Speaker, thank you so much. You guys have all been amazing, and we'll see you guys really soon.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you,
Thank
Frank.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Dreamy artistic images.
Emotive and soulful imagery.
That extra recognition and quirkiness.
Really unique images.
Se olvidaron completamente.
Extraordinary results.
Creamy bokeh and a dreamy feel.
Creative and quirky landscapes.
Unique blur effect.
Fun flares.
Poetic, oniric look.
Something extraordinary.
Hey, what's up, Shoot Extraordinary Conference? Welcome back to day 3. It has been an absolutely incredible last few days with these amazing speakers who have brought so much value and so much education. And I don't know about you guys, but I've learned so much. And we're not done quite yet. We had a call to submission to have an image review for you of your best and favorite Lens Baby images with our speakers. And that's what we're going to do right now. Our goal is to leave you with some amazing knowledge and information to help you grow as a better photographer. Now, there are hundreds of submissions. Obviously, we couldn't spend time with everyone as much as we wish we could, but we want to thank everyone who submitted. For those of you who don't know, I'm Michael Anthony. I am the Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at Lens Baby, and I am joined by this amazing group of speakers who are going to take a moment to briefly introduce themselves before we dive into the image reviews, starting with Dana. Dana, how are you? Dana, you're on mute.
Sorry. I'm doing great. Happy to be here. My name is Dana Lee, and I'm from Portland, Oregon, and I'm a fine art and portrait photographer, and just really honored to be a part of this awesome conference.
Amazing. Thank you for being here. Kathleen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kathleen Clemens. I'm a nature photographer from the coast of Maine, and the conference has been awesome, and I'm really happy to be here tonight.
Craig.
Hey everybody, I'm Craig Strong. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and I co-founded Lens Baby in 2003, and I'm excited to look at some of these great images that were made with stuff that came from us.
And Jackie?
Hi, I'm Jackie Kramer. I'm in St. Augustine, Florida. I do flowers and weddings, and I'm thankful that you are trusting us with your images to give you feedback.
And Joe.
Hey everyone, I am Joe and I live in Sacramento, California. I photograph mainly families and kids. I am a fine art lifestyle photographer and I am super excited to be here.
Yes, thank you guys so much for being here. I'm very excited. And Jackie, you hit the nail right on the head. Thank you to all of you amazing Lens Baby photographers who have put trust in us to be able to help you become better. And so we're going to dive in. We're going to get started. Here we have our first image. And whoever would like to start, please feel free.
I'll start. I like this. I like the fact that the slice is going through points of interest and that it's not centered. The rock and roll and Marilyn Monroe and you know, just kind of, you know, it's almost in the, it's a little bit below the rule of thirds at the bottom, but good placement.
Yeah, and I'll say I love the fact that this tells a story that takes me to a place, right? So often when we look at images, subject matter gets lost. And here, I know exactly where I am. I know exactly what's happening. And I think that is such an important part of storytelling. Other than the blacks at some spots being too dark, and again, this could be my monitor. Outside of that, I think it's a brilliant image.
I'd like to say that my thoughts harken back to Craig's talk about the two different outlooks that he got on one of his images. And so on that note, I'm going to kind of give you a counter to what Craig said with his slice. I probably would have liked to see the person in focus and let all of that other stuff go out of focus, because I think in my mind's eye, I could imagine that it says rock and roll and all the other stuff, but I think my eye would like to see that person in focus.
I actually love the story of this statue or the man falling off into focus. That's what pulled me in, because when you're at this sort of event, it, you know, is bright and busy and kind of crazy. And so I love that to me, it just goes with the story, but I love that we all have kind of different views on it.
I really love the way blur has been used over here and the light, it's just beautifully done. I mean, to me, I just can keep looking at it. So I just love it.
Yeah, great image. Thank you for submitting it. And we'll go to the next one unless anyone has any other
I've
thoughts.
got more to say. Hold on. So if I were to improve on this, I think I'd like to see it turned a little bit diagonal to take advantage of what's currently black space that I think is a little bit too much at the top, and to tell more of the story in the lower left. bring that rock and roll up to the middle and, just tilt the camera a little bit in such a way that fills the frame a little bit more. That upper left and that upper right being so much black feels a bit too much for me, and I kind of would like that slice to be going at a diagonal through the same area. Although I like the alternate view of Jackie having the statue or the person in focus as well, as another option. But yeah, getting some diagonals to get some, take advantage of more of the space in the image.
Great suggestions, guys. And quickly, I'm going to just see if we can go full screen here. There we go. I assume you guys can still see these, yes?
Yep.
Hit
Perfect.
the letter F. Hit the letter
All right.
F.
There we go. So on to the next one. Thoughts?
There we go.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
I really, go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
So this looks like it was done with a sweet optic, and I love the directionality in the blur and the scarf. I think it really helps to draw the eye up to her face, and it's a great natural expression as well. I really like this.
Yeah, just going with what Kathleen said, I think I really like the joy that was captured here. It just feels very authentic and very real, and I'm always drawn to like real, genuine emotions in images. One thing though I would like to add is I think this might have been taken outdoors in snow maybe, and hence all the winter coats and jackets and all that. You can see a little bit of highlights that might be overexposed on her nose and her cheek area over here. So just something to keep in mind is just, working, because the snow is just, it's all white and it just reflects light back onto her face again. So that's just something to keep in mind to make sure that you're exposing your images properly. Also, I would maybe, this could be done in post-processing sometimes, just because, with everything just being white again in the background, just adding a very hint of exposure back to her eyes, just to open up the eyes just a little bit, so that, it just, your eye goes straight to her eyes as well. That's what I would think.
Yeah, I think I'm with Jill on that the contrast is too much. We've got the eyes are probably exposed about right. Maybe they could be brightened up a little bit, but possibly if it was a raw image in Lightroom, I'd pull down the highlights and maybe add a little vignette to kind of focus the viewer on the face. It's a wonderful mood and just great attitude. I like this woman a lot.
Yeah, I'll say that it's a great expression of capturing an expression.
Yes.
And as you guys said, of course, the highlights here are a bit blown out, but overall, I still think it's a pretty solid photo. Does anyone have any other thoughts? Okay, moving on to the next one. So this is a dual submission. I will say this, we did ask for one, but that's okay, because I think that this might actually be a story or a series. So I'd love to see anyone's thoughts here. Oops, did I lose you guys?
Well,
No?
I'll say something about it, Michael. This is Jackie.
Yeah, there you go.
So I feel like if you're going to pair two images together, there has to be something connecting them that's visual as well as imaginative. And to me, visually, I don't know that I see the connection. I feel like I have to work too hard to make them go together, because the train tracks are so clear and in focus on the one on the left, and yet the one on the right is sort of dreamy, and it's telling me, my mind is reading two different things into it, two different, the effects and also what's happening in the images. So I think if it were me, I would have, if you're going to do a diptych, there needs to be something more in terms of what you see in the second image needs to be in the first, or vice versa.
I think I totally agree with Jackie in the sense that these are two great images by themselves. But I do see that seems to be a story or a connection lacking with both of them being a part of one image to go together, that is.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And one thing that I'll say also is, and this is just a word of caution, I think. I always caution people who, whether you're new or been doing photography for a long time, to try to stay away from train tracks. We've lost a lot of amazing photographers in the last few years by being on train tracks. And I recognize that's not a part of the critique, but just something I want to share.
I also want to say one thing about doing diptychs or triptychs or anything like that. If a diptych could be a single image split in two or two separate images. And I think whenever it's two separate or three separate or whatever images, each one should stand alone as an outstanding image. So that's just a note. It doesn't really apply to this, but just in general.
Yeah, great point. Okay, moving on.
I absolutely love this photo. I don't know, Craig, what lens do you think this was taken with?
I'm thinking Sweet 50.
Sweet, which happens to be my favorite lens, baby. But I love the sharp focus on her eye and the layers in the image with the flowers in the foreground. It to me is just a really captivating portrait. And I love the decision to convert it to black and white. The light is beautiful. You've got the higher contrast light on her face and the beautiful bokeh behind her. And I like the crop and the composition too. I think it's a really outstanding image.
I completely agree with Dana too. I don't think there's really anything that I would change in here. I mean, just the way the flowers are placed, and just the proportions in the image, all of that I think really just goes well. And the whole eye contact as well is absolutely beautiful. So I really love it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This does work for me. I think all the busyness in the flowers makes me think maybe it was a Sweet 35 because it tends to have a little more angular bokeh. But regardless of what it was shot on, it's just a wonderful expression, and nailing the focus on the eyes is quite the art. Almost looks so substantially sharper than the eyebrow right above it that it makes me wonder if this image was loved a little bit in post, which is fine by me.
I love the movement in the flowers. They're not just blurred. There's directionality in that blur, and I think that adds a feeling of movement. Yet the eye is so still. I think that's a beautiful contrast.
And I would just add one more thing in that, and I hate to always say something different, but I would probably recrop it. I would remove some off of the right side and cut off the very beginning of the flowers, because it looks to me like she or somebody is standing there waving the flowers. And I'd rather not see the beginning of the flowers. I'd rather see them sort of almost emerging from the edge so that you don't see which is the exact opposite of what I would normally say when I say, like get the whole thing in. But I since they're moving, I want them to kind of look like they really moved in and out.
Yeah, I really love that part of it, Jackie, the part you want to cut out.
So I'm just talking about a little tiny bit, like about an inch, if you could imagine an inch. But
so
that's
when you say that, Jackie, I envision the eyeball going into the center of the image, and that creates a lot of tension for that potentiality for me.
Really? So I would think it would go, okay, all right.
Well, and the thing that's great about critique, it's so individual, right? I mean, there's no right or wrong here, right?
Oh.
By the time we're done with this, some people are going to watch and say you guys are fools, and some people are going to say that we're great. And that's fine. That's part of the process, right? And the biggest thing is how do we help somebody get a little bit better, or maybe even, especially right now, just help someone feel a little bit better about their work and their craft. I particularly love this image. I wouldn't crop it at all. The only minor adjustment that I would make is I would whiten the iris just a hair, like that much, so that it sticks out a little bit more in frame. But other than that, incredible photo. Does anyone have any other thoughts?
Do you brighten the color? You'd brighten the colored area of her eyes?
The dark.
You'd open it up so it had more texture.
Yeah, just the eyeball. I would add a little bit of exposure and clarity too, just to make it stand out. But again, just by a teeny bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's the smallest adjustment.
Yeah, I might darken the shoulder because it's a large, bright area down in the lower left. But I love this image.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Kathleen. Okay, moving on.
It's beautiful. I think I don't know again, Craig, what lens baby do you think this is again?
Oh, you guys are testing me. Again, I'd think this is Sweet 50.
Sweet 50. Okay, I probably need to use the Sweet 50 more often then, but I just love the way the whole smoke is framing her. I mean, anything that I can find to frame my subjects, I am always up for it. And just the way you see the smoke, but then again, it's not distracting from her face. And it's like, it's just beautiful layered on top of her hair. And you can see, just everything has been done so carefully here. I think the eyes, you see a little bit of smudge of her eyeliner, on her eyes. Just the whole attitude as well. I think it really brings out the personality and that attitude. And for me, portraits really speak when you are able to bring that authenticity or that personality of the person that you're photographing. So that's beautifully done. The only minor thing that it's again a very individual, subjective thing to think about. I may just underexpose or reduce the exposure, or maybe the highlights rather, on her just a little bit to bring out the contrast so that we see more of the range between the coat that she's wearing as well as her skin, and it's not completely mixed in. But again, that's just a really minor adjustment, just to make her skin stand out as well. That's me.
I want to say, I love this image. I love everything about it. I love her pose. I love her glance. I like the expression, even though it seems expressionless, she's got an expression. I love the smoke. I think it's color graded to perfection. I think the skin and the hues, everything is just, for me, it's perfect.
Yeah, I would say that, to me, the smoke looks like it's a separate layer. It's not part of the actual image, and it works here. And I say that because it's, the Sweet 50 is falling off, but the smoke looks like it's consistent as you move to the edge in terms of its focus. But it's not distracting at all to me. But yeah, no, it's a wonderful image.
Yeah, and I'll say that I, as a former studio photographer, when it came to my portraiture, I love catch lights, and the eyes and the way that I'm drawn into this and the framing and really doing what you want a photo to do with rules of third is like really, really powerful. My eyes go directly to her eyes. I'm immediately locked in on the subject. I see the story. I can make up this thing in my head about it. To kind of mimic Joe's point, the only things that I would do is I'd change the contrast just a hair, and maybe even bump the saturation on the lipstick, because then it would match the highlights. So the other option would then be to lower the highlights, and then you'd have that more muted feel. I just think you kind of lose the exposure there on the face just a little bit, where it's hot right next to her nose. But you know what? That's so minor. Realistically, this is an incredible image. I would be super proud if I took this one. Does anyone have any other thoughts? All right.
I'm just glad she's not actually smoking.
I think the blur really helps to simplify this one and keep your eye on the kids, because there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of lines and light and dark and a lot going on. So I think the blur is used well here to sort of tone all that down and simplify it.
First thing.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just said I agree.
So the first thing for me, anytime I see an image where you're close to showing the feet, but they're cut off, I want to see the feet. So I think you could get the same background in there if you took a lower perspective, maybe get the vendor there behind the cotton candy machine, looking completely through the glass, and place her head between the kids' heads so that you see more of a impressionistic portrait of her framed by the kids. But I want to see their feet. If you're that close to the feet, put the feet in.
I think this might just be a preference thing, but for me, when I'm thinking about converting an image from color to black and white, I really want to have a solid reason why I'm doing that. And, you know, I try to pair that with the story. And for me, this is I can imagine a really colorful, fun, bright kind of scene of childhood and how exciting it is to go to the fair. I know that a lot of times people will convert to black and white to kind of help focus in on the subjects, but I might have left this in color versus black and white. It's a great image. I just would love to see it in color.
And I'd mimic that, Dana. I think often when you see an image like this, it tells such an incredible story. There's a lot going on. And when you look at the little kids holding each other's hands, I just imagine a face of excitement on the other side of it, right? And there's this beautiful story. But I don't think that black and white adds anything to this, right? So it may be a situation where you have to adjust your exposure in camera to make sure that you don't have blown out highlights and so that you get a solid shot. But storytelling wise, it's beautiful. Again, I just mimic the idea about the black and white. Does anyone have any other thoughts?
I think you'd lose the story if you had all that color. Like this for me, I think it needed to be simplified and high contrast and black and white.
Fair points. All right. Next.
So for this one, I would have reoriented this in the frame so that you have more headspace above the flower, less space on the left, and looking at the white area, it's lost detail. And I also feel like there's ghosting and there's either a selection or something that's been made on it. So it looks a little bit on the edge of it. It looks like it could be smoothed out. So I don't know if that was done in post or in shooting. And then the background, for something like this, I would like a softer background with less hard lines in there so that you have dark lines that are kind of working against the subject. And then you also have this white blob at the bottom that's merging with the flower itself. So these kind of images, it's like it's good, it's a start, but keep going, keep going. Pay attention to the backgrounds because backgrounds are just as important as foregrounds.
I agree, Jackie.
Awesome. Does anyone have any other thoughts? Okay, perfect.
I am just going to say something that I really love the whole shape here. So just talking composition wise, the way I see things, I just really like to accentuate shapes and lines and curves and those sort of things. And to me, I would have changed the way I would have shot this, even though it's a beautiful image. I love the details, but I would have liked to see the tip of, I think I'm looking at a plant or, you know, whatever this is, but I would have liked to see the tip more in focus and sort of see the shape of what I'm looking at. So that way, and maybe just face it and not shoot it. I don't know how to explain this, but face the actual image. So I'm actually facing the plant, but not shooting it from the other angle that I'm actually looking at. I hope that makes sense. So I think I would just like to change the angle that I would shoot this. So I actually see that slight S shape of the plant, if that makes sense.
I love how the background shadows and highlights work with the flow of, this group of seed pods or whatever we're looking at. It's, to the right you get a shadow and then it goes to highlight, and left is highlight and then it goes to shadow, and then right is highlight and it goes to shadow, and shadow goes to highlight at the top at the end. So it just feels like there's a real dance happening between the foreground and the background, or the subject and the background. The only thing that bothers me here is that the center of the sweet spot, I assume this is a sweet spot lens, it's hard to tell in macro, has one of those seed pods that's really out of focus, and I don't like looking past something that's out of focus to something that is in focus, especially when it's right in the middle of a sweet spot.
Yeah, I agree with Craig, and for me, there's too much space at the top. I think that the subject is a little too centered, but I love the effect on the stem.
Awesome. Any other thoughts? Okay. Next.
It's an amazing image. I obviously love the light, the bokeh at the top.
Yeah.
It looks like that to me is so much a part of the story. Just looks like the light is dancing around him. I love the slice of focus. I don't love necessarily where the focus fell. I think for this image, I would have liked his face to be more in focus, but I just love the story here of him, being kind of in this busy city taking a stroll, but it's still as if he's in a world of his own. And the light is just beautiful.
Yeah, I'll mimic that. I think, again, storytelling wise, this is beautiful. The thing about street photography that you don't understand until you're like out there doing it is that like actually grabbing that focus, tack sharp wherever you want it is very difficult, especially with a moving subject, and especially when you're trying to be, I don't want to say sneaky, but not seen, to capture a moment. And that's effectively what street photography is capturing a moment. It's real, it's unedited, it's photojournalism at its best. And outside of the adjustment that needs to be made on the area of focus, I think it's great. I think it's a beautiful photo.
I agree. I love the light. I love the bokeh in the upper right. Feet feel too close to the bottom for me, and the man, the bike, and the other person in the background are crowded. So I'd like to see more space, and potentially, in order to get the feet in the foreground, if the main subject was a little bit further, maybe in the rule of thirds, you could make the right side of the image parallel to the diagonal leading line that's going down to the left of the bokeh there, and skew the whole thing to get the bottom basically be rule of thirds, the lower half of the front man and the bike, and then the person behind.
I agree with everything everybody has said. The bike and the man behind him are kind of merging, and so I'm thinking if these were flowers, they're too close,
Yeah.
and they're too in focus. So that kind of pulling my eye away from him, which is the main subject, and I'm really loving his glance semi out of the image, but at a diagonal and kind of a little bit in the direction he's walking, but sort of off to the right. I like that. I love that bokeh. And I think one of the things, and I'm not an expert at street photography at all, but I just know from what little I've shot in scenes where there's people, that sometimes it's easy for me to critique somebody else's image and tell them, because I totally agree with you, Craig, that there needs to be more foreground. He needs to be walking into something a little bit more for me too. But sometimes there's an inability to do that because there may be a dump truck there or something that inhibits the ability of the photographer to
just add even an inch or a sliver of something or turn or angle another way. So I give people a lot more leeway and latitude on street photography for that reason.
I remember getting critiqued for an image that a National Geographic photographer was critiquing, and it was this moment, it was a beautiful moment of this man feeding a nutria. It's a beaver-like rat, but he had befriended, and he said, well, you know, his pant leg and the nutria are, you know, overlapping, and I'm thinking, you know, if you reshot this, give it some space. And I was like, but this is a moment. But the reality is, if we go into that next time that we're in the same situation with this in mind, that's the time that you let them walk a little further, or you get a lower angle, or you tilt the camera. I think this could potentially be improved, or I would like it better, with a tighter crop that would put the main subject closer to the rule of thirds. We'd lose him below the knees likely, but potentially skewing the horizon a little bit as well might make it feel like the tightness of the man bike person isn't quite as you know, it could feel more spacious or appropriate.
Yeah, all great points, guys. So for the sake of time, we'll move forward. But if you'd like, if this is your image and you'd like more critique, please feel free to reach out to us.
I mean, I just talked about a skewed perspective. I think this is the minimum when you're intentionally tilting the horizon. This is the minimum where it starts to feel purposeful. Anything less and it feels like an accident. Yeah, so I'll just speak to that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. But I wonder if you could do that by having less foreground, right? By having more subject and focus in that bottom third. Because, you know, I'm often, as photographers, we're always looking for leading lines. Where do my eyes go? What is it that I'm seeing? What is the story? And to me, my eyes go, okay, log on the sand.
Yeah, in the center of the image.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to go search for all of the people doing all of the people things. And then that's amongst the blown out highlights, right? So what I would think about doing is exposing for whatever that subject is while that's in frame by moving that horizon line. And again, these rules are made to be broken. And I think as long as you understand the intention, like Craig mentioned, why you're doing it, then there's always an argument for that. But here, I just don't see it because my subject matter is log on the sand.
Well, and so, I would counter. Go ahead, Michael.
No, go ahead. No, please.
Yeah, I would counter that if the subject is the log, which I don't know if that's the best subject, put that log in the bottom rule of thirds and put it in focus there. Leave the horizon line exactly where it's at.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Take 2 steps, 3 steps forward, and move that down.
And just going with what Michael and Craig you have said, I agree. I use foreground blur quite a bit, you know, at least just to play with it in my work. But clearly, a subject is missing here as to what we are looking at, because what is in focus, it's just sand and rocks. And if there's something interesting, you know, it's just, you know, maybe a beautiful rock or a seashell or something, you know, that is interesting for us to look at, and everything else in the background is in blur, that's totally fine. But clearly, I think the whole point of having a subject, a clear definition of a subject is missing over here.
Does anyone have any other thoughts? Okay, great.
What a story.
Yeah, that's the first thing I was thinking too.
And you were thinking, get off the train tracks.
Yeah, that too.
I think it's great. I love the diagonals and the diagonals in the coat and the flowers in the skirt and that beret on her head and the hair with the curls and the very, very faint crisscross in the upper left. I think this is just fantastic. It brings me into her head and begs me to try and imagine whether she's coming or going, whether she's sad or happy. You know, it's just, there's just so much here.
Yeah.
I think it really tells a beautiful story. I love all of the lines and the shadows and the hard light, which isn't always the easiest to shoot in. And I might have not centered my subject so much. I might have put her more on the rule of thirds. So cropping in from the upper right. And maybe if I was reshooting the same scene, getting a little bit more of the train tracks in and having her more along the right hand rule of thirds on the right side.
I really like the aperture choice here for how much is in focus, and the focus placement works really, really well for me.
Yeah, and
it's a super compelling story. And to come back to what Jackie said, all I'm wondering is this a happy moment or a sad moment, right? Is this an adventure or a runaway? And I think the emotion in her hair, even though it's super subtle, and looking out there and seeing what I assume are waves crashing, is just, it's such a potent story. I mean, and to Dana's point, harsh light like this, I don't know really what you can do about blown out highlights and shadows. And sometimes story, it rules all. It is the trump, right?
Yeah. And I would say an image like this, we contain the story. Like I don't want an explanation. I want to imagine. If somebody told me what was going on, I'd be disappointed.
Right. That's the beauty of it. I agree.
Does anyone have any other thoughts?
It's really beautiful.
Yes. Amazing. Thank you for the submission.
I'll start with this one. The primary thing that I want to say about this is posing, and whether it's intentional posing or your decision as to when to actually depress the shutter, or which of the multiple images you might have selected to submit. There's a couple of things that just I would adjust on this one. I like the energy in her reaching up, but I would like her facing me. I don't like to cross the face like this with both an arm and a leaf. So you can't see the face. And so she's basically hiding herself. And the other thing is, I'd like her to kind of turn, even if it's at an angle, more towards me, and not to chop anybody off at a juncture, at a joint. And I feel like I want to see either the feet, or I want to crop it up and tighten it really in, because the area in the background where it's blown out is detracting, and it's not adding to, and the area in the upper right sort of as well.
For me, this image, the light is so beautiful and the fall colors. And I agree with everything Jackie just said. It looks like there's space if she were to step back a few steps to where the tree isn't competing so much for, in the frame. And then I, as the photographer, would have stepped way back with her arms going up. And we know that she's probably throwing leaves over her head. The sight line goes upwards. So I want to see kind of what is above her. And so I would have stepped back to not chop any limbs, had her step over a bit, and really get a full scene of that motion and that movement and what, she's tossing in the air.
And just going with Dana's point and Jackie's point too, so many times I've seen when I've taught in-person classes where people just take their cameras out and then just really go close and then just start clicking away without really stepping back to see and take just a few seconds, or at least a minute, to see what they want to capture. So I think it's just super important just to step behind, 10 feet, 6 feet, whatever, and just see what's happening before you press the shutter.
Yeah, all very great points. Does anyone have any other thoughts? Okay.
So I think on this one, the human form down at the bottom, sitting on the rocks, or it must be rocks. is it gives scale to the scene, which I wouldn't know how big this was otherwise, which is nice. It feels too soft to me to really be to work completely when the person is that small. Too much glow, and then I'm distracted by how bright the sky is above the orange color.
Yeah, and I'll mimic those sentiments, Craig. From a story perspective, and we've talked about subject a few times, I know that story. It's a great subject. It's a great subject matter. I think often many of us have been there, and you can even see the little boat in the background, but my eyes automatically, and this is something you have to think about as a photographer, your eyes will automatically always go to the brightest part of the image. And so when you're going to expose an image like this, you need to expose it for your subject. Now, if you were just shooting only clouds, that would be different, but I'm going to imagine that's not your subject here. So just think about where your exposure is and metering for that when you're setting up a scene, especially in the evening as you're starting to head into the golden hour. Does anyone have any other thoughts? Okay.
I'll start with this one. I would offer you the same tip that I did with the last one I did, that was a white flower, in that if you're going to chop off any portion of the flower, it should be with intention. So if you're going to do a close-up, really do a close-up. Don't make me want those little tips, and I feel like I want them. I also feel like you've cut the sepals of not the sepals, but the little kind of the neck of the flower off. And I treat my flowers as though they were portraits, and I like to see the neck and maybe sometimes part of the bust and the head. And I know that sometimes with portraits, we can chop off the top of the head, and that's okay. But I don't like to do that with my flowers unless I'm really coming in for a close-up. So that's number one, is I would reorient this, and the flow of the flower is more vertical. So I would have made this a vertical orientation. And the background's beautiful. So just make it vertical, give it more room to breathe, and give it direction, headspace above it, and go in and clean it up in Photoshop. There's a lot of stuff. I don't know if it's dander and there's bugs on there inside. So I know if you don't know Photoshop, it's probably it's a good reason to get in and start to dabble in Photoshop. Just clean some of that stuff up, and I think it will make it a much more appealing image.
They could clean it up in Lightroom as well.
I totally agree, Jackie. It just feels really tight in the frame to me. I definitely can see this shape as vertical instead, backing out a little bit. And it looks to me like the green sepals have texture to them, but I don't think there's enough in focus to really draw that out. And I think it's a strong characteristic of the plant. So I'd want to see a little more texture.
And the only thing I'll say, and I'm no flower expert, amongst the flower experts in this panel right now, I love the color of this. I think that is the thing that draws me in the most, is just looking at this and going, that is bright, that is vibrant. I don't know if you bump saturation here. I can't really tell. It looks super clean and sharp. And I'll just mimic what they said about spacing. And next.
That makes me happy.
I love the colors here. I think it's just, just makes me feel like, just like Craig said, brings happiness. And the color scheme is just beautiful. The water droplets are just lovely. I don't know exactly if it's a lens thing or if it's an aperture that they've used. Somehow it feels soft to me. So I don't know if it was done with intention or not, but it doesn't quite look with intention, because the softness seems Like something just seems out of focus where I would have liked to see a little bit more sharpness on the petals and the water droplets itself. But I love the colors here. I mean, it's, you know.
Yeah, I didn't see that, Joe, but when you mentioned that, I think what's happening is the center of the sweet spot is a little defocused. So you get, at first look, what looks like a bigger sweet spot than this aperture would normally give, but what you're getting is kind of a fat donut with just a little bit, not quite as sharp as it might have been in the center. And that's where with the Spark, squeezing it all the way flat and seeing that donut and then making note of where you're at and letting straight out, that helps me know where it can be as sharp as possible. But that's a really common thing with Lens Baby. When you've got this curved field of focus, the tip of your curve has all of your, you know, most of your resolving power, and it gets less and less as you go away. When you back focus that tip of the curve, you're intersecting your subject in kind of a donut, but it's very subtle here. I didn't even notice it until you brought it up.
Yep. I would probably play with different crops on this one. The colors are beautiful. The drops seem to be what's the most in focus as opposed to the center of the flowers. And I would tend not to put that flower center right at the midline. So that I can't tell you which way I would go with it, but I would just try different crops, bringing it in from one of the angles and one of the corners.
Does anyone have any other thoughts? All right, moving on.
I love a curl in a flower. My students know. I always tell my students that the best light and the best focus need to be on the same part of your image, because they're both areas of contrast, you know, the best light and focus versus blur. And I think this person nailed it. I mean, there's no doubt at all where you want to draw my eye here is to that amazing curl, and it has great light on that area as well.
Yeah, I agree. And there's something also to be said about allowing your subject matter to take up the entire frame. And I think that works really well here. That's not always often the case, unfortunately, because things get lost, and especially around detail. But I'm drawn in. I know exactly what I'm looking at. The colors are absolutely beautiful. I would like to actually see it cropped out just a hair more, because I'm curious about what the edges of this look like. So much of that curl that you mentioned there, Kathleen, I wonder if the whole thing curls, but that's just a curiosity than anything.
Yeah, I agree with Michael. I'm curious about more, but I wouldn't necessarily like it to be, you know, further away. I think this kind of intimacy with what's going on in the center is really nice, but I would like to have the camera, you know, look to put the curl in the bottom right or the bottom left rule of thirds, and then judge which one. You know, the more contrast would come in if you moved that curl to the right and you saw more of the left, but then you'd see more of these kind of just beautiful cascading lines if you put the curl in the rule of thirds in the lower left.
Great points. Does anyone have any other thoughts?
Now, if it were me, I would play with the crop, and this would be a great candidate to do some kind of layering with.
Awesome.
Yes, this looks like a double glass image, tilted way too far, and I love the artifacts that happen when that happens. And you know, we have the same optics in the Sweet 50, but when it's wide open, double glass tends to do this. And I just love the craziness that's happening. You see swirl and you think of twist, but a lot of our lenses will swirl sometimes in the foreground, not the background, or on the plane. And the sweet spot lenses, when they've got too much tilt, or you know, you've dramatically back focused or front focused, well, it would be back focused, you get that donut that is just bokeh, and that's what we're seeing on the right hand side in the upper right. And that's really cool. I just love the lines.
So I would like to say something about, oh, I'm sorry, Dana.
No, go ahead.
If this were mine, I would probably make a triptych out of it. I would slice it into 3 and put it on the wall. It's a great abstract.
I just love the color. It makes me want to go and push my lens babies, you know, more to the limit, more than I push them. Looks like a light party.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool. And what's so interesting about photographs like this is they're so abstract that the subject could be literally anything. And I have a sneaky suspicion it's like a pile of leaves on the ground. And what's so cool about this is it's a story that you can create for yourself. I don't actually really have a lot of critique other than to say, great job creating a story. I want more. I would love to see more of this from the Lens Baby community of really pushing the edge here. So brilliant photo. Does anyone have any other thoughts? Great. As we start to wrap up here, we have time for about a couple more photos, guys. Thank you so much for all of your submissions, panel. Thank you guys. This has been amazing critique. We have time for a couple of more, so let's dive in and see what we can have.
I think this is a beautiful example of when going really soft works. It's ethereal. The colors are lovely. The lines are beautiful. I really, really love this composition. I think this is gorgeous. I might pull the highlights down a bit, especially in the tongue of the iris, that white part in the center, but it's really, really dreamy and just lovely.
I agree with everything Kathleen said. Sometimes when I approach an iris, I don't know where to focus because you can't help but want to capture that beautiful like bearded spot, but then your eye starts to go off into other petals and it's just such eye candy. So I have nothing else to say, but I love it. And I like that curve around on the left-hand side too. I'm really impressed with the ability to get it soft, but yet in focus in all those right places.
I'd like to see higher contrast. Like the black skin, I mean, the darker areas go darker.
Great. And so what I think we should do, since we have a little bit of time left, is let's do a rapid fire round. So we'll just go till the end. We're almost through the selection that we have for today. What do you guys think about that?
Good.
Do it.
All right, cool. Let's do it. So just quick comments.
I like the mood.
I love the dappled light.
I love
like
the
this.
lines here.
I'd love to see this as an ICM also.
ICM?
Intentional camera movement, sorry, a vertical pan.
Yeah. Yeah, the road or path is a little distracting to me.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is just, I would like to, if you're going to have a vertical, shoot it vertical. I want to see the top of the trees.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's
Straight
just
out of
such
Hollywood.
a timeless. Yeah, it's just such a timeless capture. Beautiful.
Old Hollywood glamour.
Yeah. Just feels like she's under a spotlight and I like it.
Yeah, the lighting is amazing.
Yeah.
Beautiful
This one
backlight.
reminds me of the woman with the fur coat on and the cigarette. They're very classic looks. They just very moody. Love it.
Yeah, I think this is a great portrait. With a style like this, I think that when it comes to framing, this makes more sense to my brain to see this as a horizontal crop. So a landscape crop. When you're in portrait like this, I think that there's a lot that is probably said. There might be too much being said here actually. And so I'd like to see it cropped in a little bit and maybe go horizontal.
I might have moved my shooting perspective over just a little bit so that she didn't have that line going through the back of her head, and she was more centered in that, graffiti, whatever that is behind her. But I think it's a great shot.
I concur with what Michael said in going landscape and making it almost like a postcard being sent to someone saying, love you, love you.
Great point with the graffiti on the back.
It's a dog in a sweet spot. How can we not love it?
Just pure happiness in a picture.
Yeah. And love it.
Beautiful tones and color.
Now, the only thing I would say is, like, can we go eye level with the dog? I would love to see what it is at that forward facing perspective.
Mm-hmm. I want to see the Shrek donkey a little bit closer and the girl a little bit more out of focus.
And I would like to see the girl's glance on the animal.
Yeah.
Great point.
This feels like subject matter is too small that's in focus. And I see a slice, which is great, but it feels like that slice should probably be going through the waves and through or through the people in the foreground.
And you got to remove that blob at the upper right.
Oh, the bit of the palm tree?
Well, yeah, that'd be an out of focus blob, but that might be better.
Yes, exactly. It's probably, to my eye, the most in focus thing on there.
Right.
So,
and composition is good. We got rule of thirds on the horizons.
Yeah.
You think of the waves as a second horizon.
Yep.
I love this. I love in-camera flares. So to me, this is absolutely beautiful. I love the light. The only thing I would probably do is step back, maybe just, maybe 2 steps, 3 steps, so as to get a little bit more of that flare towards the top as well, and that it's not cut off. But I love the light. I love the details. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Oh my gosh, this is so great.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah. I like the fact that the very dark edge of the little inlet here is just tack sharp, and it goes right through the other photographer and off to the horizon.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you don't really know if the subject is the person or the sky. It's just this, like, it's really amazing. You feel like you're there taking in the scene with him.
It's a lot of mystery too. The out of focus, it leaves some to the imagination.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a sucker for silhouettes. It's one of my favorite kind of photography. Amazing exposure. It's a beautiful scene. Tells a great story. There's maybe a touch too much foreground here, but that's just me being nitpicky. It's a great shot.
I might like to see a little separation between the camera and the photographer. It feels like I'm not sure where the shoulder or the arm ends and the camera begins.
I also, just being nitpicky because it's an amazing photo, would have shot a little bit higher to bring my subject lower so that the horizon wasn't kind of splicing through him. So just like a little shift up of the camera and you can shoot a little higher, and then he's, it doesn't have that line going through him, but that's super nitpicky because it's an incredible image.
No. And with that, we are wrapped. Shoot Extraordinary Conference. Thank you guys all so much for your amazing support over the course of the last few days. This conference could not be done without you, could not be done without this amazing team at Lensbaby, our awesome speakers and panelists, and everyone around the world who supports Lensbaby constantly. I just want to say that from my perspective, I messaged these guys 3 weeks ago, and I said, I bet we can do it. And here we are. And I'm so proud of them all. I'm so proud of you guys for willing to step into really being uncomfortable and growing as photographers and growing with us and learning how to become extraordinary. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm thrilled about this. I can't wait to do it again next year. Any final thoughts from you before we wrap up for the day?
It was a great team. You
Yeah.
pulled it
It's been a
together.
privilege.
Yeah.
I just loved every minute. And I feel like I have learned so much too. I think I'm going to be asking for Legos for Christmas, you know, so, or maybe use all those Legos that my son doesn't want to use anymore. I don't know.
Yeah, I just feel newly inspired to pick up a camera and keep shooting and creating. So thank you for doing this.
Yeah. Definitely inspiring in so many ways. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, Shoot Extraordinary Conference, thank you guys all so much. We will be re-airing these over the course of the next couple of days, and then each individual session will be available on our website and YouTube in the coming weeks. Please do us a favor, follow us at LensBaby USA on all of the social medias, and we'll see you soon.
Dreamy artistic images.
Emotive and soulful imagery.
That extra recognition and quirkiness.
Really unique images.
Se olvidaron completamente.
Extraordinary results.
Creamy bokeh and a dreamy feel.
Creative and quirky landscapes.
Unique blur effect.
Fun flares.
Poetic, oniric look.
Something extraordinary.